Morning. Let me, right, make sure we're recording. Let's put you front and center. And just for the moment, I will join you. So, good morning, everyone. And how sad that we are having to meet like this, but how wonderful that we can. Daniel, thank you so very, very much for agreeing to join us this morning. I know it's not an easy ask, and it's just so important for us to be all together and to be able to connect with Israel as well. So much appreciated. And it's also very nice to see and connect with you personally as well. It's been far too long. Everyone on the link has seen my introduction, so I am not going to repeat because we only have half an hour and I want to make the most of it. Daniel's well known to all of us, and I know most of the people on this call. So if you do want to know more, there's plenty on the web, or you can email me afterwards. So we will open up for questions at the end. We're going to have about 20 minutes from Daniel without interruption from me either. We've had a couple of questions already. If you do want to, it is helpful if you put your question in the chat. I'm the only one that will see that, and that will maximize that part of the timing as well. Daniel, as I said, it's not an easy task we set you, but what is uppermost in your mind this morning? And can you perhaps sketch out for us what you and other Israelis are feeling at the moment? Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Judy. So first of all, thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for those remarks, and thank you to you and to so many people on this call, and so many people in the UK for reaching out in such beautiful and moving ways. The emails, the calls are really important in these times. You know, the efforts to help, the equipment that's being sent, and so on, and this feeling of unity. You know, you have to stop for a moment and just remember that, was it a month ago, 2 months ago? You know, the past 8 months have been one of the most divisive periods within Israel, between Israel and world Jewry and so on. And that makes this sense of unity all the more extraordinary. You know, Joseph Soloveitchik, the great American rabbi philosopher, used to say that the Jews are bound together by two different covenants. One of them he called Brit Goral, which is a covenant of fate, and the other is Brit Ye'ud, which is a covenant of destiny or of mission. And in a way, the past 8 months has been a debate about that Brit Ye'ud. What is our mission? What is our vision? What are our competing dreams? And at times that's almost tore us apart. And this last week, we've had this sharp reminder that Brit Goral, the covenant of destiny that doesn't make any distinction between us, really overwhelms the differences that have been dividing us. In these remarks, I don't want to repeat what I know so many of you have been following so closely on the news. I don't want to talk about the specifics of the atrocities that we're still uncovering. I don't want to talk about the numbers, which tragically every time we listen to the news increase, whether it's the fallen, it's the hostages, it's the wounded. But it really, as Judy asked, I'd just like to share some thoughts about where we are and tentatively what might lie ahead. And any remarks I make are going to be tentative. All of us are so overwhelmed by so many different emotions. There's worry, there's grief, there's fear, there's anger, there's occasional moments of pride. And these things are dynamic. They change from day to day. Sometimes they change from hour to hour. So maybe I'll start with 3 comments about what we in Israel, what all of us have seen over the past week, and then maybe a couple of comments as we try to look forward. So the first comment is about what we're facing, and we're still processing the massacre on Simchat Torah. We're still discovering some of the atrocities, but it seems clear that this is a moment of sharp moral clarity. You know, it's a stark reminder for us and for the world that this particular conflict, this particular attack is not about this particular policy or that particular policy. It's not about this piece of territory or that piece of territory. It is an expression of a visceral Jew hatred, a maniacal desire for the annihilation of Israelis and Jews everywhere. It's been written for everyone to see all these years in the Hamas National Covenant, but it's clear that they mean it. And I think it's hard for many people, for many good people, to accept that there is such evil in the world. But there is, and we have seen its face. I was speaking yesterday to a serious international lawyer, and he said it was hard for him to think of a single crime in the statute of the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, that hadn't been committed by the thousands of terrorists who infiltrated Israel. And in a world of grays and nuance, I think that this is a moment of sharp moral resolution, and we need to hold fast to that to face what is coming. I'll say a word about that, and we need to work hard to make sure that the world holds fast to that too. The second thing that I'll say a word about is failure. There will be months, there'll be years of investigations and commissions of inquiry. But even at this stage, it is absolutely clear that this was a catastrophic failure on many levels. At the political level, the intelligence level, the military level. You know, there's extraordinary cases of heroism by individuals, but at the higher institutional level, some of the most trusted elements of Israeli society, and of course I'm not including the politicians in that, I'm including the military and the intelligence, they have been found wanting with tragic consequences. And these feelings run exceedingly deep. Everybody knows somebody who is fallen or wounded or captive. Everyone in Israel has heard recordings of people in the south who were calling from their safe rooms, saying that they're outside and waiting for hours, or in some cases even days. The length of time that it took to set up what is called an emergency unity government. And in the months and years ahead, this will have enormous consequences. A lot of people are comparing the current failures to the failures of the Yom Kippur War, where there was a sort of hubristic conceptia, way of thinking that led to disastrous analysis. And there are similarities, and in some ways, it seems that this particular instance is worse, certainly in terms of the impact on the civilian community. People forget, in the Yom Kippur War, there were terrible casualties to the defense forces, but no civilians were killed. And obviously that's very different in this case. But I do think there is one point that we should make, which is that unlike 1973, unlike 1967, at this stage, the existence of the State of Israel is not in question. The question is, what will be the price? But there is no difference in the depth of the pain. There's no difference in the anguish of the questions. But I think most of us are not ready to ask those questions just yet. I spoke to one of my sons yesterday evening. I have 5 boys who have been called up, and he was one of the earliest responders. And I asked him what he thought about the leadership in those early days. And his answer was quite simply, I can't look backwards. I can't look backwards and fight. If I'm going to fight, I'm going to look forward. And I think that summarizes the mood of the country at the moment. And the third comment that I'd like to make is about gevura, is about heroism. Even amongst this tragedy, if it seems that the horrors have come from another age, there's also heroism that seems to have come from another era. There are the soldiers who are showing up, a turnout rate of 130%, which means that, so many soldiers who have not been called up are knocking on the doors of the army or simply turning up at their bases. People have asked me, how is it that the army is short on equipment? Well, one of the main reasons is that they are having to cope with many more soldiers than they actually called up. And these are people who are not in their regular army service, but they're leaving their jobs and they're leaving their families and they're leaving their kids. One of my kids was due last Saturday night to celebrate his anniversary with his wife by going to the Bruno Mars concert in Tel Aviv. These are the people that have been called up to the army and are the line of defense. And it's not just showing up, it's depth of commitment. People who are injured, sent back, and want to turn around and go back to the front and be with their fellow soldiers as soon as possible. Yesterday evening, my daughter saw her husband, who was in the army, for a few moments at a funeral of his cousin. He came out, went to the funeral, saw my daughter, and then turned around and went back. He didn't see his kids. And the women too, extraordinary courage. Many of them serving, but those who are not serving on the front are looking after children. There's no kindergartens, there's no schools. One of our daughters-in-law is staying us with us at the moment. I saw one of the kids early one morning on a Zoom. He's 3 years old with his kindergarten, being told a story by their kindergarten teacher. I mean, it's really quite heroic what these women, what these young people are doing. And beyond the military and their families, there's the general public. There's a public will, which is also extraordinary. The Magen David Adom had to tell people to stop showing up to give blood because the queues were so long. Last Shabbat, I gave one of my boys my car to get to his base, and then somebody told me, there's a group of people who are volunteer drivers. They'll go anywhere in the country and bring your car back from where it is. Opticians are giving free glasses. My daughter tells me that in her neighborhood, there are knocks on the door. There's girls, can we cook for you? Can we clean for you? And so on. And obviously we have a lot of young tech people thinking, what can we do? On our street, there is the son of friends of ours has produced an app to connect Miluimniks, reserve soldiers who have not been called up, with units that need their help. And there have been tens of thousands of pairings. So, as so often in Israel, if you look from the top down, it's frustrating, it's depressing. But if you look from the bottom up, there are many, many reasons to feel inspired and encouraged. So those are some of the feelings that I have, certainly, about where we are at the moment. And if I'm tentative about those, I need to be even more tentative as we try to look forward and think about what it is that we can expect. But the first thing to say is this was an unprecedented attack. And so the response is also going to break the mold. Last night I gave an interview to the BBC, and the question, a very BBC type question, are you going to act with restraint? And sometimes people need to be reminded, we pulled out of Gaza 18 years ago, 8,000 civilians, along with their homes and schools and cemeteries, synagogues. And since then, Israel's policy has really been one of restraint. The reason that Israel has expended such effort, such expense, such manpower in developing Iron Dome technology to shoot missiles out of the sky, tunnel detection technology, fence technologies, and so on, is precisely to try and avoid the need to enter into the nightmare that is the cities of Gaza, with all of the complexity that is involved. And even the incursions that we've had over those 18 years have been limited in scale and limited in achievement. And I think that the equation has now changed. It's changed because of the scale of the atrocities, the number of casualties, the realization that living with an Iran-sponsored terrorist infrastructure on your border is not an option. And the Israelis are united from left to right on the need to uproot this terrorist infrastructure from Gaza. And that means it's going to be a longer operation, a deeper operation, one sadly with more casualties, Israelis and Palestinians, and complicated even more by the fact that we have over 150 hostages being abused and taken advantage in a way that makes one think only of ISIS in terms of its barbarism in Gaza. And alongside this, of course, we have the very real threat of having to face a conflict on our northern border, which, of course, is part of the grand Iranian strategy of a circle of fire against Israel. And if that happens, we'll be fighting against Hezbollah, which is far better armed, far better trained, far better experienced than Hamas. And we've already had the beginnings of salvos from Hezbollah with anti-tank missiles across the northern border. And so a lot of the international efforts at the moment are designed to try and send very clear messages to Israel's northern partners, neighbors, the severe consequences for the people, for the leaders of Lebanon and actually Syria for this kind of involvement. And of course, this kind of conflict needs preserving international legitimacy. You know, all our previous rounds of fighting have been a kind of race where the arc of legitimacy, which is what enables you to do what needs to be done, moves against the pictures that Hamas is trying to create of civilian casualties. And this time, we need that arc to be much longer. We need it to be more resilient. And that is why statements, absolutely clear statements, and you know, we heard Prime Minister Sunak's speech, and we've heard other speeches and statements which have been unprecedented, I would say, in their recognition of what it is that we're facing and their moral clarity. But we need to preserve that. We need to make sure that that clarity or that focus is maintained. So that's the military challenge. And with all the complexity, I think I and most Israelis are pretty confident that we're going to meet it because, you know, to quote President Biden, quoting Golda Meir, we don't have any other choice. Looking further forward, I think we can anticipate other challenges. This violence is happening against, you know, the background of the most divided Israeli society in our history. And we have this extraordinary moment of unity. The soldiers, the Brother in Arms group that was campaigning against the judicial overhaul were, you know, enthusiastically called up and are fighting. And in many ways, the people have been showing the leaders what unity means. But there's also tremendous sorrow, tremendous anger, and almost an existential angst. You know, the idea of the state of Israel was that at the very least, the Jews would be free of the threat of pogroms. And now we have seen the worst pogrom of the last 80 years taking place on the territory of the state of Israel. And my fear is that the things that are today uniting us will actually at some stage fuel the narratives that divide us. You know, was it the withdrawal that led to this or the occupation, and so on and so forth? And one of the challenges, not for today, but for tomorrow, is are we going to be able to rise above those tribal narratives and to preserve something of the unity that we're feeling today? And finally, maybe just a word about our relationship with you, our brothers, our sisters, world Jewry. Your support is incredibly important. Israelis do feel that, and today it's letters and parcels and equipment, and tomorrow it might be posting troops and families living with trauma or wounded, which is something which the UK Jewish community has a wonderful tradition of doing. And there's all sorts of other ways to help, and I'm sure you've seen, and if not, I'll be happy to share links and so on. But there's one thing that I haven't seen a lot of attention given to, and I just want to mention it, and that is how at this stage do we help a younger generation of Jews, your kids and your grandkids, think about what is relating and happening to Israel in a way that preserves and deepens their relations. You know, this is a generation that already in many ways has a hard time connecting with Israel. Certainly when they go off to campuses and so on, it seems like a burden. And I think there's a danger that at this stage it's going to seem not just like a place of controversy, it's going to seem like a place of danger to them too. And I think it's really important that we think about how we mediate this and how we relate to it in a way that deepens that relationship. So just to finish with 3 very tentative suggestions. So first of all, I think this is an opportunity for educating a group of young people who maybe haven't been fully educated about Israel. Think about giving your kids, your grandkids, a decent book about the history of Israel. There's many of them. You know, Danny Gordis's concise history of Israel is great for young people. My brother Adam has prepared wonderful materials for the Edgar program that are really good at explaining Israel to young people and so on. But to think about this as an educational opportunity. Secondly, I think it's really important to engage young people in some kind of active support. I think one of the ways to combat a feeling of powerlessness is to try and engage people in a sense that they can themselves be actors in Jewish history. So whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's collecting items that you're sending, whether it's engaging with Israeli families on Zoom and so on and so forth, try and find a way of making the younger members of your family a part of that. And then finally, I think it's really important that the story that we tell at the moment is not a story of victimhood, but it's a story that focuses on resilience and courage and purposefulness. And there are incredible stories of commitment and creative responses. And as I said before, gvura, heroism, including of young people that are coming out of Israel. And I would really encourage you to share those, to find ways to share those with young people so that Israel is and remains a source of pride to them. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you, Daniel. You always speak so beautifully, and that was more than I could have possibly asked with 48 hours and only 24 hours for most people to hear about it and to come on. I almost don't want to take questions because you've done it so beautifully, but we do have a few. So I'm going to give you them all, and then I'm going to give you 3, and then you can choose which and how to answer. And we will attempt to finish on time because I know people have to get to work as well. So, number 1, how realistic do you think it is for the 24-hour deadline for the evacuation? And we know the issues around that as well. Following on from that, from David, who can take over running Gaza if Hamas is removed? Let's start with those 2.
So I'm cautious about making comments that make me sound like I'm a military analyst or a political decision maker. Based on my experience, the challenge to civilians in Gaza escaping places of attack is not the lack of spaces and not the lack of warnings, which by and large Israel has been quite remarkable with. I'll tell you a story. I was a military advisor in my army service, and my officer at the time wrote an article about the warning measures that Israel took before launching operations against terrorist bases to encourage the civilians to leave. And she circulated this article before she published amongst what are called the JAGs, the Judge Advocate Generals, the legal advisor corps of other armies of other sort of Western countries, for their comments. And the comment that she received from a number of them was, please don't make it look like these measures that you take are mandated by international law, because we can't be sure that we would be behaving in the same way in those circumstances. There are places where it is quite clear. At the moment, we're talking about sort of moving away from the south of Gaza. We're talking about moving to schools which are not attacked. We're talking about moving to open spaces and so on. The challenge is Hamas not allowing civilians to leave. And one of the things that we've seen in previous rounds of fighting is that Hamas calls on civilians to go onto the roofs of buildings that are its strategic assets, or otherwise prevents civilians from leaving. And that, of course, is a nightmare scenario. And it's a nightmare scenario that plays into the sick calculus of Hamas, in which every civilian casualty is some kind of perverse sort of PR, asset. It's a perfectly important question to ask: who are the potential leaders in Gaza in the future? And we don't have a clear answer here. The fact is, in the past, the hope has been that the Palestinian Authority would step up to the plate. And in a way, people have tried to read into Hamas any number of motives for this particular atrocity at this particular time, including Iranian agendas and trying to break up a potential relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth. But one of them is Hamas positioning itself for a post-Abbas environment. To position itself, Hamas also has sadly significant support in the West Bank. But what is clear to pretty much every Israeli at the moment is that the debate about who can step up to the plate, work hand in hand with the international community to take on the civilian responsibilities in Gaza, will be a much more effective one if we have it when we don't have the specter of Iranian terrorist infrastructure embedded within and underneath Gaza.
We've had two other questions. I'm just going to take one of them. Let's go for, how can the Red Cross not be helping to locate and help the kidnapped civilians? And maybe there are and we don't know, of course, but what's your feeling on it?
So I've worked very closely with the ICRC in the past. I don't want to pass judgment on them. I will say that humanitarian organizations who are working in these environments are in impossible situations, because they cannot function without some degree of accommodation with the authorities there. So in some degree, they have to find ways to work with them. Their obligation is absolutely clear. Their obligation is that they should be reaching out, they should be demanding visits. By the way, it's not just the ICRC. I would really call, and again, I don't want to make this talk a call to action. There are so many calls to action, but I would really urge people in the UK, for example, to try and think about the people that the UK has a specific responsibility to amongst the captives and so on, people with British citizenship, and demand consular access, demand contact and so on, and demand them to be returned as they ought to be, but in the first instance to take all of those measures. I think an enormous failure. I mean, we have our own failures to commend with, but I think the international community needs to be asking itself some very, very painful questions. And based on my experience, it's not going to be in a hurry to ask them. Let's start from the most basic, which is Israel is currently under massive onslaughts from two territories, from the Gaza Strip and from South Lebanon, in which it encouraged Israel to withdraw from and assured them that if Israel did withdraw, they would be there in order to make sure that nothing could happen. And then so on. Think about South Lebanon, where the UN said we'll set up a robust UNIFIL to stop the arming of Hezbollah, and it's really a sad joke. So I think there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. The UN UN schools, which really have become, it's very well documented the extent to which these are bases for hiding ammunition and terrorist factories and so on. So I think we need to hold as much as we can these international bodies to account.
Okay, we've got to 9:30, and those that know me know I like to do things at a time, even though we could obviously go on longer. I'm going to hand over to Raymond in a minute, but I just first wanted to give my own personal thanks to you, Daniel. You came up with more than I could possibly have asked you for, as always. To everyone in the audience, first of all, obviously, thank you for coming. This is something we're looking at doing at weekly, and I would love your feedback on that. Daniel, if we do go ahead, and as you say, this is not going to be a short term, we would love to invite you back in maybe 2 or 3 months and chat again if you would be willing to do that. To those of you in the audience, I have a list of names that I'm approaching, but if you have people, then do by all means email me or JW3 directly, who will pass it on to me, and so that we can make sure we're getting it right for you. I think that's all from me, except you will have noticed that, as always, we have recorded this. There were a lot of people that couldn't join at short notice and have asked for it, but also people during the talk have said they would like to have it and pass on to other people. Just ask me, or again, the email that came out from JW3, those of you that book direct, they will also have a copy of it. I'm going to ask Raymond now just to say the final few words. I think we both unmuted at the same time. Let me do it. There you go.
Is that okay? Thank you, Judy. And first of all, thank you to you, Daniel. It's hard for me not to call you Ambassador Taub. Daniel was the ambassador to the UK when we first opened JW3, and we just celebrated our 10th anniversary very recently, and has always been a great friend to JW3. So thank you very much for doing this at such short notice, especially with everything else going on. And we send our love from everyone at JW3 to you, to your family, to all of our family and friends in Israel. Any of you that need to go now, I won't be offended if you log off. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes just to say a couple of things, which is a lot of people have been asking us, especially today, are you closing? Are you closing? People fearful about security, about anti-Semitism, and some people saying, oh, is it appropriate to be open and doing all the events that you're doing? And this is something I've had to answer a lot in recent days. And so I just wanted to just say a couple of things, which is we take inspiration from a lot of Jewish sources and a lot of Jewish wisdom over the years. And I'm going to mention two in particular, a slightly unlikely pair of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, and Leonard Bernstein. So let me just quickly explain. Chief Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, was a great friend to JW3. He memorably wrote after a previous wave of heinous terrorist attacks that the Jewish way is to rescue hope from tragedy. However dark the world, love still heals. Goodness still redeems. What terrorists seek to destroy, we will continue to build. Community, democracy, tolerance, respect for each other, and the sanctity of life. Or to put it in the words of Tevye, God would like us to be joyful, even when our hearts lie panting on the floor. Drink l'chaim to life. And as for Leonard Bernstein, these incredible words that he said in November 1963, at the United Jewish Appeal of New York's fundraising dinner. 3 days before that dinner, JFK was assassinated, and the entire Jewish community, like the rest of the country, were in shock and confusion and grief. And they just didn't know whether they should go ahead with their fundraising dinner. And they decided to go ahead as planned. And the maestro Leonard Bernstein was due to be conducting members of the New York Philharmonic, but he asked if he could give a speech before. And the last lines of this famous speech, he said, "This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before." And so our, JW3's reply to the violence and terrorism we're seeing in Israel and to the hatred and anti-Semitism we're seeing on the streets of London is to make our JW3ish music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly. We dial the light up, we dial the volume up, and we don't dial it down, and we continue to build community. So we've realized over this last week that JW3 right now is vital to people. People are coming to us. People want a place to be, their home away from home. And on top of everything else we're doing, we're adding events like this, the weekly Friday briefings. There will be more events that Judy will be emailing you about, or you can see on our website, where we've become we're providing a home for a load of Israeli families that are stuck in London. They were here on holiday for Sukkot. There's hundreds of Israelis here who are here on holiday and can't get back. Some of them have had, well, most of them have had family or friends murdered. Many of them have lost their homes, and they are distraught, and we're providing a home and a space with activities for children that we're providing free of charge for all of them. And that's going to be happening. Hopefully, it won't be needed for too long, but as long as it is needed, we're providing that here. We are amplifying the appeals of the UJA and Magen David Adom and Hatzolah and other emergency appeals. We're going to be a collection point for people that are bringing toys and games and clothes for children that are stuck here at the moment who need it. We're bringing over the Israeli singer-songwriter Danny Bassan next week, as long as his flight can still go. He'll be coming over to perform a special night for Israelis in London to lift their spirits, and to be a benefit for one of the charities in Israel. And there's more and more. And just the last thing to say is, I find myself in an unusual position of doing a whole load of media at the moment. We've just come out from a live interview with Sky News. They're still down here interviewing people. We did ITV yesterday in the Evening Standard. The reason I mention that is because they contact us here at JW3 because they know we are the hub for cross-communal life, a place where they can find Jewish voices from across the spectrum, and a Jewish space where they would also find non-Jews who are as welcomed with open arms as they ever are. So you know, because we've been here many times, we will always be the home for Jewish culture and conversation. We're here for you, whether it's online or in person. We hope when you come in, you'll find a safe space, and bear with us whilst we've increased our security, whilst it takes a little bit longer. I wish you all and your families a Shabbat Shalom. I hope that all of your families and friends in Israel are at least physically safe. I won't say I hope everyone's okay, because I know none of us are okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and to what Raymond just said. Please take care, and we hope to see you again very soon. Goodbye, all. Shabbat Shalom. Daniel, thank you so much.